This week on Newstalgia, I'm turning up the heat with everyone's favorite Talking Dragon. We're going to be taking a look at Spyro the Dragon Reignited. Quick disclaimer, you can only get this by purchasing the Spyro Reignited trilogy. I won't be covering all 3 games in this video, just the first one, but I will be covering the other 2 eventually on this series. Now for some background. Growing up in grade school, most of my friends had N64s while I had a PS1. Personally, the console just interested me more with the exclusives they offered. I grew up on games like Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, Twisted Metal, and Final Fantasy VII. I understood the appeal of games like Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart, and Smash Bros, but they were never really for me. With the exception of Super Mario 64, I did actually love that game, just not enough to buy an N64. But my fondest memories of playing my PS1 were spent on the Spyro series. I've always liked Spyro as a character, and he's really fun to play as. The concept was pretty straightforward. It's a platformer. But they added some unique twists, like the ability to glide, breathe fire, and ram your horns into enemies. If you're unfamiliar with the story, essentially all the dragons become crystal statues, and it's up to Spyro to free all of them and then fight the orc responsible, Nasty Norc. It's not a complex story, but it's a fun casual one. I remember being really disappointed when Crash Remastered Collection was coming out on PS4. Don't get me wrong, I love the series, but I would have preferred that they did Spyro instead. Thankfully, eventually they did release the Spyro Trilogy Remastered, and holy crap does it look beautiful. You have to keep in mind that this game was out on PlayStation 1 originally. It came out in 1998, and it's over 20 years old. But the care and work that went into redesigning this game was simply incredible. The graphics are just absolutely stunning, and you could tell that the new art was inspired by the Spyro Skylanders series. There are moments in the game where, when you free certain dragons, they have these small, incredible details. Like some of them will have steam coming out of their nose in cold areas. It's such a small detail, but it truly makes you appreciate how much work and thought was put into this. Another thing to point out is that since it originally launched on PS1, the game is a lot shorter compared to most platformers you'd play today. It's not a bad thing. It definitely never overstays its welcome, and you really enjoy the experience, but it would be hard to recommend picking up this collection just for the first game. You can't buy it separately, so you'd have to spend the $50 for all 3 games to be able to play this. Again, it's not a terrible thing. I love the entire series, and honestly, that's a really fair price. But for people who are unfamiliar with the series and just want to try it, they have to buy all 3 instead of just 1. The nice thing about Spyro has always been how casual it is. It never gets overly complicated, but at the same time, there are some moments where you have to think. The game also has an interesting health system. When you're playing the game, you're accompanied by a dragonfly named Sparks. He has 4 levels. Gold represents max health, blue is 3/4, green is half, and no Sparks equals 1/4. So essentially 4 hits and you're dead. You can replenish Sparks by having him eat butterflies, which are found from killing random little creatures like sheep throughout the different levels. Each butterfly restores 1 level, and once you fed Sparks 10, it restores your health back to yellow immediately and gives you a life. It's an interesting system that isn't complicated, which is nice. Overall, I had a blast revisiting the world of Spyro. The new art was fantastic to look at, and the gameplay was still the same. It brought me back to those days of playing Spyro after school and trying to chase egg thieves throughout each level. It is hard to recommend this game right now. As I said, you have to buy the bundle, and I won't be talking about the other 2 games for a while. But for now, if you love platformers, want a game you could play with your kids, or just grew up on Spyro like I did, this game comes highly recommended. Until next time, this has been Newstalgia.